Like ved Kanariøyene på Afrikas fastland lærer Europa sine egne kortsiktige interesser gå foran prinsipper om menneskerettighet og fred. Velkommen til SANDFAST, vår podcast om Vest-Sahara, den siste kolonien på det afrikanske kontinent. Det er nok ikke alle som klarer å holde på i 10 år etter 10 år med å forsvare en lite kjent sak. Med få ressurser, med medier som er uinteressert, og med myndigheter som heller vil fremme egne interesser. Hvordan holder man det da gående som aktivist? Dagens gjest er British Danielle Smith. Hun er grunnlegger og leder av initiativet Sandblast, som fremmer sahrawisk kultur. Vi skal prate om motivasjon. Hvordan holder man seg motivert med solidaritetsarbeid på det 30. året? Hva koster det å la seg engasjere? Hvordan finner man balansen når man kanskje heller bør prioritere privatliv og egen karriere? Hi, Danielle. Finally, we can meet face to face. I'm very happy and glad that you have time to be our guest today. Welcome.
Oh, it's my great pleasure, Asriya.
Danielle, you are the founder and the director of Sandblast, which is very similar to the name of our podcast, SANDFAST. How did you end up working on the Sahrawi cause?
Well, my involvement with the Sahrawis is a story of fate in some ways. I mean, I heard about them many years ago when I was still in university through somebody who had got involved with the issue, and I was living in the States. And of course, it was an issue that was almost completely unknown. And so in university, I became aware of the Polisario struggle for self-determination, Sahrawi struggle. And then, but it wasn't part of my path at that point. I was going to become a doctor. And when I finished university, I ended up starting to take a different direction than what I expected, and learned Arabic. And really fell in love with the language, and then became fascinated by the region and the history and the politics. And then from there, I ended up doing a degree in anthropology. I realized that my passion really was with cultures and language and trying to understand what unites us as people all over the world and what makes us express our humanity in so many different ways through culture. And through my anthropological studies, I became very interested also in women, gender, and Islam. And so when I finished my degree, I was in the Middle East and I came back to the States. And my path crossed with this woman who had introduced me to the Sahrawi cause when I was still in university. And her name was British Smith. And she had married a Sahrawi, and she had the first Sahrawi American child. Tariq, as far as I know. Maybe there's others, but she's the first one I officially know of. And she was involved. And so we started to collaborate, and then she said, come to the camps with me. And this was in the summer of 91, when they had just agreed to the settlement plan, and there was this high hopes that there was going to finally be a referendum, and the war was going to end, and the Sahara was going to go back. So this was a very pivotal moment to go to the camps for the first time.
I just want to say for those listening to us, we are in a conference and we were struggling to find a room. Sorry for the sound quality. And you mentioned you traveled to the camps in 1991.
Well, it was the most impactful experience I've ever had in my life. For start, I arrived there on the 5th of July. So coming into scorching hell. You know, I will never forget getting off the plane. And at those days, they used to fly during the day, not at night like they do now. So we arrived pretty much close to midday. And it felt like, as I got off the plane, someone had come up with a big frying pan that they've just taken off the stove and hit my face with it. And, you know, at the time, we're talking 30 years ago, everything was different from the way it is today. I mean, Tindouf, where we landed, was this teeny little spitting hole, and then there was practically no roads, so we were off-road almost immediately after we left the airport, and then we were just driving through this relentless, barren, empty desert and thinking, where are the people? How can anybody live here? Because it just seemed impossible to imagine. And then suddenly we go over a little hill, and then this huge spread of tents as far as the eye could see. And it was very orderly. It was bizarre, because suddenly, there was just rows of little, tents and little buildings, but very, very, very organized. And, the thing that really, really, struck me at the time was the women. The women I met very quickly early on in the visit, because I was there for about 10 days. And I remember meeting Sania Ahmed, who was the governor. Well, she was actually at the time the Secretary General of the Women's Union, and watching them talk about their situation, hearing them, and just feeling their power, feeling their clarity, feeling their role, and feeling in charge. I mean, there was no doubt in my mind that the women were completely in charge, and it was such a humbling experience as a woman coming from the West, being in the middle of nowhere in a refugee camp and feeling these were like the most powerful women I'd ever met in my life, seriously. And although I spoke Arabic, I didn't speak Hassaniya, which is the local dialect, so I didn't really understand that much to begin with. And I heard a woman speaking in Spanish, and I speak Spanish, so I ran to her. I thought, okay, here's someone I can communicate with. And that was Khirabullahi, who at the time was the working foreign relations for the women's organization. So I said to her, I'd really love to meet with you, if I can, and interview you about the role of the women. Because right there, I was very much fascinated by this. And so we ended up speaking 3 hours, trying to find some cool air somewhere from a dying air conditioner behind a couch. It was hilarious. We were on the floor, sweating away, having this incredible conversation. And at the end of the conversation, she said, look, you're going back to the States. I really want you to help us. And I was like, I didn't come there knowing what I was going to do. I just thought, okay, I've got to go and see this situation firsthand. So she said that we need to organize a tour for women to go and speak about the situation, because we're really afraid of what the Moroccans are going to do. We know we're not there yet, and we want to keep the global attention on our situation. So what can I say? I can't say, oh no, sorry. I was like, okay, I'll do my best. And that really started the ball rolling. She was the kind of catalyst, because she actually directly asked me to help. So I went back to the States, and I was terrified because I had no idea how to start. It was a big moment in my life to undertake this.
And I think one of the goals of doing this episode with you is that there are many other people, young people, students, or people who just want to help and get involved, and they don't know where to start. So, and also most importantly are how to keep the motivation. It's not easy and believable. I mean, I wouldn't believe it if someone tell me, no, for 30 years I have been this motivated and this positive, But first, you travel back to the US and you have been active since. So what has been the nature of your involvement in Western Sahara issue generally?
Well, my involvement with Western Sahara was very varied. In the beginning, I mean, one of the big challenges that I faced immediately going back to the States and trying to find out how I could get a tour organized for Sahrawi women to come and speak there was no information. It was very, it was just fundamental. And I was living in Boston in an area that has some of the best universities, Harvard, MIT, all these top universities, and I was going to the Middle East departments, and I was saying, look, we'd really like to organize a talk here by Sahrawi women, and they all looked at me like I was making this up, like they didn't even know what I was talking about. And it was such a shock for me to realize the degree of invisibility that this issue suffers from. So when you're dealing with something that's so invisible, you have to find a way to make it visible. And for me, the most obvious thing was doing something either with film or photography, because you have to show people what you're talking about. And that took me into a direction which I was, of course, not at all prepared for, to start to make documentaries about the Sahrawi cause. And I have to say, like, everything I've done with the Sahrawis, I've always come with not the skill set. And the only thing I could do was try to, first of all, inform myself, because I felt like if you're going to get involved with any sort of issue, I think a fundamental thing you have to take the responsibility as much as you can to really inform yourself, to speak to the people who you're involved with, hear what they're really, thinking, how they see things, what their experience is. Really engage yourself on that level, because if you're going to try, for me the scariest part was, who am I to represent the Sahrawis? I'm in the US, there were virtually no Sahrawis there. Who am I to talk about them? That was when it was clear there was already problems with the referendum process, and that the referendum, which was supposed to take place in '92, was not going to happen. And so the second trip was about trying to find out how were the Sahrawis seeing the situation, now that it was clear that things were not going to go smoothly. But when I was there, of course, it became a lot also about the women and the role that they had played. And also another aspect that became very strong in this documentary was the philosophy of the Sahrawis about their conflict, that they had this capacity to separate people from politics. And I came across a woman who had been a prisoner in Moroccan jails and had gone through many hardships. And when I met her, she told me the story that when she escaped finally from Western Sahara, and after she was released, she went to meet Moroccan prisoners that were in the refugee camps. They had been taken as prisoners of war. And I was fascinated that she wanted to go and visit them. And then she told me, she had this conversation, she said she could feel their suffering. She felt that they were just as much victims as the Sahrawis, because it was the same regime that was making them suffer. And I was really fascinated, because I thought, if you can still see your enemy as a human being, there's a hope for the future.
You used documentary, photography, and today you are using...
I'm working largely through creative cultural education. One thing I need to say, I did spend a couple of years teaching English in '93, '94, and I believe this again was the first experience of teaching English in the camps. And this time I was asked I never taught English. I said, I speak English, but I'm not a teacher of English. But the president, Mohammed Abdelaziz, who sadly is no longer with us, he was the one that directly asked me to teach English. And I was like, okay, again, I'm being asked to do something I am not prepared for, but I will do my best. So I went to the camps again this summer to teach for 3.5 months. And I think at the time there was this recognition that English was an important language globally. And I always felt that there should, to access the English-speaking world, and also the fact that it is a global language, whether we like it or not, it can reach many more stages. And because the Sahrawis suffer from their voices not being heard, I always felt it was an important tool to try to build in the camps for them to use for their whole mission.
So, Danielle, you talk about 1991 and how you traveled back to the US and really no one knew about Western Sahara. Unfortunately, even if it's much, much better today, the conflict is still not visible at all. But you talk about that you didn't have any formal training on all the things you have done, but you just have to do it because there is no one to do it. So what do you say, based on your experience, to anyone who actually don't fit in any of category of being a lawyer or speak multi-languages, but they want to help?
I've realized that everyone has skills, whether they know it or not. It's just being able to be encouraged that you can contribute. It's like everyone is good at something. And there's so many tasks that are needed for this is a cause, like any cause, that requires the contribution of so many kinds of help and people and abilities. So you should never underestimate what you can offer. I think you should always be humble about your limitations and know, this is something I can do, this is something I can't do. So whenever I knew I couldn't do something, I would try to find somebody who actually knew what they were doing. But if you are doing events, people can help. People have organizational skills, or they are good at writing, or they're good at finding locations. There's so many things, or get ideas. Some people are really good at generating ideas. So it's about recognizing what your abilities are and saying what you can do, and then also growing. Because I think one of the things I can say about the Sahara cause, it has forced me to grow in many ways, like speaking publicly. I'm terrified of speaking publicly. It's one of the things that, I always avoided my entire life. And then suddenly I'm thrown into a situation where I have to go and speak in front of people. And I'm still terrified, but I have more experience, and it's facing, constantly your own demons and your own insecurities. And if you stay with it, it really enables you to grow.
But Danielle, 30 years working, it must be with a lot of challenges. It's a known conflict. It's limited, if zero resources. And no one is there to guide you. You must have met some challenges. And we don't want to scare anyone who wants to help or get involved, but sometimes it's also to be honest about, maybe I'm exaggerated if I say what price, but really what price you pay, or especially those who stay long. Because we know some people come and goes, and some people go and never come back.
Yeah, well, I think it's a very, very important question. And I think one of the things I learned, because I'm a very passionate person. When I do something, I just do it with all my heart, and I don't hold back. So I think when I first got involved, I just gave every part of myself to the Sahrawi cause, And one thing that I've discovered with time, it's very important to find a balance, because as an individual or as any group, nobody can do everything. But the Sahrawi cause, like any situation that's similar to that, there's so many needs and there's so many lacks. So you feel overwhelmed, and you feel you want to try to do everything you can, and you can't do it all. This is really important to keep in mind, and you shouldn't feel bad about it, but you have to come to that realization. And then say, what can I do that can be effective? I feel like if you can positively affect somebody's life, if it's one person, that's huge already, because it has this kind of ripple effect. And so doing what's within your means is really important. Have a balance. Always remember yourself. Like for years, I just stopped doing things that I loved for myself because I don't have time. This is a luxury. I have to just focus on this. And then you burn out. This is what happens. You have to nourish your own soul to keep going. So I do tango dancing, and I've been doing that now for 6 years. And it's my space. It's what I do, which I absolutely love, and I'm not going to let anything take that away from me. No matter how much I love the Sahrawi cause, this is important space for me to respect my own needs.
Yeah, and I think that finding that balance is good for people, like in a human basic need, but also it's good for the cause. Cause need people with energy, with motivated, not burn out, or people who are walking around and feel guilty or feel they don't deliver. But you were speaking about a documentary. Could you please say something about, and it's about you and about your work?
Yeah, so I have a very good friend of mine who's from Venezuela, and she's becoming a filmmaker, and for her master's, they had to do a portrait of someone's life, 20-minute portrait, and she asked me if she could do it in my life. And she met me already as involved with the Sahrawi cause, so her focus is very much on my relationship with the Sahrawi cause and how it has affected my life. And so I think because we're very close friends, I was able to feel very comfortable, and I think probably was very honest. More honest than I even expected to be. I think what I like the documentary, although I was terrified of seeing how you come across. I'm not used to being in front of the camera that way, so I was just like, oh my goodness, But I think she did a lot of justice, not only to my life and my involvement with the Sahrawis, but also to the way she captured something about the Sahrawi personality and culture through my experiences, obviously, because they were through stories that I shared with her. But she really brought out things that you don't normally hear or understand about the Sahrawis.
What is the name? Sorry if you had mentioned.
It's called Sand Tracks.
Sand Tracks.
So there's also sand going on here. There's Sandblast, Sand Tracks, SANDFAST, and so she wants to get it out to film festivals. Yeah. And I think it's a way for people to see that anybody can get involved in something like this. You don't need to be a specialist, but as an individual, you can bring other people on board. Yeah. And that's how the process starts, and it grows, and you have to be patient. The cause has taught me patience. I just hope that I can live to see a really positive result. This would be one of the biggest gifts in my life, to see the Sahrawis receive justice and to have the life that they deserve and the homeland that they deserve and the recognition that they deserve. For me, this is a dream.
Very, very briefly, Danielle, could you talk about your project, Desert Voice Box, or basically what you're actually doing if people want to find more information about Sandblast and your work?
Well, you asked me about motivation. So this is somehow connected to that question because I think at the heart of the Sahrawi struggle is their culture and their identity. This is something that's been affected in a lot of alarming ways, both in the occupied territory and the refugee camps, because of prolonged exile. It has affected the culture in many, many ways. And I feel that there's been this stagnation with the Sahrawi cause, and so there's a need to develop new tools and new perspectives and a creative approach to your situation, capture the people's imagination globally, and how to communicate about it in new, fresh ways that can wake people up. So one of the things that I'm really interested in is how to prepare the future generation. And so we're working on a small scale at the moment. The project is called Desert Voice Box, and we have introduced English and music education to primary school children in the camps as an after-school project. And it was started off as an experiment in 2016. And it's been fascinating because we now have over 60 children, and we're training local women to run this project because one of the last things we want to do is create more dependency. We want children and women and everybody ultimately to be empowered and to have all the tools and all the confidence to take it, to drive things forward on their own. We have 4 women, 2 women doing English and 2 women doing music. We want to create a strong local connection, so we've also been trying to create that dialogue between the generations, with the children and their elders, about engaging with their culture through English and through music. We also have integrated some amazing musicians, Sahrawi musicians, to really teach the children about their musical traditions, and both the contemporary and the more sort of exile musical traditions. We hope this can grow into a blueprint, which can then grow and maybe can become a basis for even going into the schools, because I know English is a language that they would like to introduce more widely in the camps. But the problem here is training and qualification. So a big goal of ours, especially with the women that we're working with, is actually we're prioritizing women who didn't finish secondary school but have real ambition to teach and give them a chance to develop a really meaningful career locally that they can then have skills that they can take anywhere. So we want these women to have certifiable skills that they could go to Spain, they could go to Australia. Because again, there's training that happens in the camps a lot of times, but it has no recognition anywhere else. So we want to address that as well as part of the project.
We are coming to the end. Danielle, it has been a pleasure speaking to you, and I think we're going to speak for a long time with so many topics. So thank you so much for, having the time to be with me here today. And you can listen to Danielle Smith in our SANDFAST podcast, and then you can read about her in her Sandblast page, and then you can see her documentary film Sand Tracks.
Yeah.
And this is a new challenge for people listening, to come up with a new project with the name Sand. Maria, what do you have?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me today. Thank you.
Hvis du vil lære mer om konflikten, gå til vest-sahara.no.